Okay, by now you probably have a fair understanding. I think it's safe to say we can create a medical database or of some kind, just so you can have a more real-world example. So if we go back to PHPMyAdmin and we press New by here to create a new database, and we're just going to call it Medical DB for database, DB for database, Medical DB. Press Create. Okay, no tables found, that's fine. We're going to create a patients table. So PTIENTS, patients. Number of columns is 4, that's fine. Press Go. Okay, nice. Now I'm going to zoom out a minute just so it's easier for me to see. So here then, first column, we'll call it patient ID. And this should be an integer. And the default will be none. And again, this will be a primary key. Okay. And we're going to press Go. Auto increment, check that. Okay, now you can leave some comments for yourself if you want to explain what this column is in case you think you're going to not understand it in a week's time or whatever. I do leave comments sometimes if the columns are a little tricky to understand if you come back to them. So currently we have a patients table that isn't created yet. So basically anything you put through PHPMyAdmin, it creates a query and passes it to MySQL. So in databases, tables are actually created with SQL, right? But PHPMyAdmin does a lot of automation for us, which is very handy. Because of all this automation, you only ever really need to worry about select, insert, update, joins, which we'll get to later, and stuff like that, right? So I want you to do patient underscore first name. Okay, and this is going to be a varchar. So then you need to think, how big is a first name really going to be? I mean, it really is unlikely to be over 20 characters, right? But we'll just do 30 just in case, right? But you know, if you were doing this for a client, you would think about this a lot more in depth and properly. But because this is educational material, it's designed to teach you SQL, we're going to just put 30. So we're going to do varchar again for the surname. So create a new column here, patient underscore surname. And again, 30 is fine. You know, I doubt you're going to have a surname longer than that. Just to let you know, so you might be wondering, well, what happens if the name exceeds that length? Well, MySQL just caps it. So let's say your last name is 35 characters long. Only 30 characters will be put in the database. So it doesn't cause any sort of error or anything like that. So it's very important in your web application or whatever you're doing to use this database. It's very important you have a clause to check for the length and make sure that it can fit. And if it doesn't, give them an error, because MySQL will accept it and just cap it basically. So let's see then. So patient ID, patient first name, patient surname. I guess would have patient address, which could also be a varchar. Now, you know, you could have address line 1, address line 2, but just for this example, we're just going to do patient address and do 300. Okay. So then you'll see up here, we've run out of room, right? And we want more columns. So up here, it'll say go, add 1 columns, go. So just press go. And there we are. You can see another column's being created here. Now the database hasn't seen these yet. This is just in PHPMyAdmin. When we press save, it then creates the query and sends it to the database engine, right? Okay, so we want patient telephone, and that'll be a varchar as well. And we'll just do 16 characters here. That should be fine. Okay, I'm pretty sure. Oh yeah, you want a patient age as well. So press go up here again, and we're going to go patient date of birth rather than age, right? And we're going to click here and you'll see date. You see this? These are all the types, right? So decimal is obviously for decimal numbers and so forth. Date and time is for when you need a date and a time, you know, pretty standard stuff. Timestamp is like it's a number that represents a date and time. We should use date for this because we don't care the minute or hour they were born, right? We only care about the date they were born. So press save. So just to check, you should have patient underscore date underscore of underscore birth, right? And all of these. So once you've done that, press save down here. Brilliant. So it's created that table. And there's one thing I forgot to mention earlier, is how do I add a new column if I need to, right? Well, it's simple. You click the table, click structure, and then you should have the ability to add, and yeah, here we are, add a new column here, right? Add 1 columns after patient date of birth. So you select where you want it after. So if you want it after the patient's first name, you press go, and you're back to this window where you can add that new column and press save. But we don't need to worry about that right now. So yeah, that's our patients table successfully created. So now what else are we going to have here, right? We're going to have an appointments, right? An appointments table. So click new, and so click new in Medical DB, and we're going to have appointments. Okay. Now, if this was a real database, that would, it would be thought through a lot more, right? Like we might have a table called person, right? Because you can have staff and patients, right? And then you would link them together. As a matter of fact, that is how I would do it. But because this is just teaching you guys, we're going to avoid that for now. So appointments, here we go. So what does an appointment have? Well, an appointment has an ID. So we go appointment ID. Click the index, primary. Press go. And it's going to be auto increment. Perfect. And then what we're going to do, we're going to have an appointment address. You see? Appointment _ address. And that'll be a varchar of 300. Now, what else will the appointment have? Well, it'll have the patient ID, because this appointment is for a patient, right? So we have patient _ ID. And now, because in the patients table, because the patient ID is an integer, we keep int selected. Okay, so all I want you to do now is press save. Okay, good. Now I'm going to explain this to you a little more. So basically what we do here, the patient ID here would be the value of the patient ID stored in here, right? And then that associates the appointment with the patient. But it only associates it through it if you write the SQL to do that, right? So you can also create relationships, but we'll get onto that later on. So once you've created both of those tables, let's create a new patient. So click the patients table, and we're going to go to insert, and we're going to have the patient first name as Paul, or whatever you want it, Chloe, anything. Surname is O'Brien, and then 3 Test Street, Wales, UK, something like that, postcode. Telephone number, you might have something like that. And in the patient date of birth, let's just say they were born in 2018. Who cares, right? Okay, so press go. And brilliant. You can see it's generated the query for you. If we take a look at that, insert into patients, patient ID, patient surname, patient address. And by the way, you might be wondering, okay, well, what is this \r\n? Well, \r means a carriage return, and \n means a new line. So this means the data will be displayed on new lines, right? Basically, which is why we see it. Which is why we see it on new lines here. Without that, it wouldn't be on new lines. Okay, brilliant. So you've created your first patient in your medical database. So go back to appointments, and I want you to create a new appointment. Press insert, and the appointment address. So we'll just call it, I don't know, 10 Test Street, ABC Test, whatever. And then what I want you to do is press go. and you can see, oh, incorrect column value. Now that's because it was expecting us to enter a patient ID. So you know that's the database protecting you, right? But it was more of a warning because it allowed it to go through. But what we can do, we can tell the database that it has to link to a real patient. So I'll show you that later. But yeah, so far we've got it set up. So on the next lesson, I'll show you the relationships and how we can link those two together so that you can only select a valid patient in here.